Alright, I have no personality, so here's a theory only breakdown. On the left is the C major scale. If you flatten the 3rd, 6th, and 7th, you get a C natural minor scale. Natural minor scales are related to the major scale. If you start on the 3rd degree of the natural minor scale and go all the way up to the next 3rd, you get the relative major, in this case E flat major. The thing about natural minor is that the 7th scale degree is a whole step below the 1, so it doesn't point to the 1 as well as the 7 in the major scale. To solve any problems that arise from this, there's a harmonic minor scale that raises the 7th scale degree back up to create this half step. However, the harmonic minor scale now has a large leap from the 6th to the 7th. Because of this, there's a 3rd minor scale, the melodic minor scale, which raises both the 6th and 7th scale degree. Note that since the 7th scale degree doesn't lead to the 1 on the way down, there's no need to raise these notes on the way down. Therefore, the descending melodic minor scale sounds the same as the descending natural minor scale. You can build chords from the notes of these scales. I've linked the transcription of my beat in the description, and it doesn't have any Roman numerals in it, but I'm showing you this because I will refer to some of these Roman numerals in order to discuss the functions of chords. Before I go any further, let's look at some of the different types of chords. First, we have a major chord. If you flatten the 3rd, you get a minor chord. If we go back to the major chord and raise the 5th, we get an augmented chord. And if you flatten the 5th of a minor chord, you get a diminished chord. We can add more notes to these chords. If you add the major 7th to a major chord, you get a major 7th chord. If you add a flattened 7th to a minor chord, you get a minor 7th chord. And if you add the flattened 7th to a major chord, you get a dominant 7th. The dominant 7th chord contains a tritone between the 3rd and the 7th, so it is often used to create tension. There are many other 7th chords that I won't go over, but here are a few more. A diminished 7th chord is built by stacking minor thirds, and a half diminished chord raises the 7th back up. Another name for the half diminished chord is a minor 7 flat 5 chord. In jazz, it is common to add a ninth onto any of these chords, and frequently people will create altered dominance by sharpening or flattening the 9th and or the 5th of these chords. For example, this is a C sharp 7 sharp 9 sharp 5 chord. Let's move away from chords for a second and look at the opening Nokia phone solo. The first 4 notes outline the C sharp 7 sharp 9 sharp 5 chord that I just mentioned. This implied altered dominant is a 5 chord that points to the F sharp minor 9 chord that follows it, and this demonstrates how it's possible to create harmonic direction without an underlying chord. Another thing I wanted to highlight is the use of a chromatic enclosure right before measure 5. A chromatic enclosure involves 2 notes that surround a target note by a half step. Chromatic enclosures can add tension to a line, and also can help to make sure that the target note, which is often a chord tone, lands on a strong beat. Let's hear how these elements sound in context. The Nokia phone passes the melody off to the vibraphone, which starts with that sharp 9 sharp 5 structure that I keep talking about. The bottom and top notes of this structure are repeated soon after in this large leap in the melody, but the chord underneath is a G7 flat 5. Why does this work? Well, keep in mind that C sharp and G are a tritone apart, and the tritone in the C sharp 7 and G7 chords are the same notes. Because of that, G7 can be used as a tritone substitution for C sharp 7, and therefore, these chords are functionally the same. While we're talking about chords, let's discuss voicing. Although the chords I showed at the beginning of the video were built on triads, chords are almost never voiced that way. Take a look at the Rhodes part in measure 31. Generally, it's important to voice chords in a way that minimizes awkward leaps. Also know how the bottom 2 notes of the first 4 chords are the root and the 7th of the chord. This is definitely not the only way to voice jazz chords, but it's the first way that I learned. Some could argue that since there is a bass part, the piano should play a rootless voicing or another inversion, but I really don't care. Anyways, I should quickly show how the bass line works in this beat. This walking bass line plays constant chord notes that either outline the triad of the chord or move in a scale-like fashion. A few harmonic things to notice are that the strong beats, 1 and 3, usually contain notes from the chord, and that the note right before a new chord is usually right next to or a fourth below the note that follows it. There's no example of this in the transcription, but using a descending fifth has the same function as an ascending fourth in these contexts. This is a good time to talk about 2-5-1s. If the 1 chord has a root of C, then the 2 chord must have D in the root, since D is the second note of the C scale, and the 5 chord must be a G chord for the same reason. 2-5-1s are ubiquitous in jazz, and they work because the D minor 7 points to G7, which creates the most tension. This tension is released by resolving to the C major 7. Minor 2-5-1s are a bit different. You could use an unaltered 2 minor chord, but it is also common to flatten a 5th to create a half diminished chord. This is because this flattened 5th is diatonic. Here, F is the 6th note of A harmonic minor, and also it wants to resolve to E. I should mention the unique rhythm of the vibraphone melody here. This is an example of a hemiola, where 3 notes fill the space of 2 beats. In this case, I mean it's 2 strong beats on 1 and 3. Normally, filling up an entire 4/4 measure with 3 notes wouldn't work, but since this beat is so fast, it kinda does. Here's the solo line at measure 33. The use of harmonic minor creates a large leap between the D natural and E sharp. I really have no reason to use a harmonic minor scale instead of the melodic minor scale here, except for the fact that I think it sounds better in context. But the use of this D natural creates an exotic scale at the end of this passage. A bebop scale adds a chromatic tone to a 7-note scale, and this serves a similar purpose with the chromatic enclosure, to make sure that the chord tones land on the beat. Here, we see a C-sharp dominant bebop scale with a flat 6 and a flat 2. Note how the notes that land on the beat are all part of a C-sharp 7 chord. I would also like to take a bit of time to look at the trumpet part in measure 36. It is common for the 4th trumpet to double the note of the top trumpet an octave below, which gives the top trumpet voice a reference note to listen to. However, most of the trumpet chords in this beat do not follow this principle because the parts are relatively low, so this technique is not necessary, and also this isn't real life, so there's no reason to worry about playability anyway. Let's go back to talking about rhythm by discussing the percussion break. You can create rhythmic complexity by utilizing odd groupings. For example, the bongo part is accented in groups of 3s, and the agogo bells play these rhythms that fall into groups of 7/8 notes. The tempo blocks are in even groupings of 6 plus 6 plus 4, but by putting the accented higher block notes on offbeats and leaving the beginning of these groups open, the rhythm sounds more complicated than it really is. Giving every auxiliary percussion instrument a unique part creates something that sounds like this. Now we'll take a look at the key change. There are many ways to change keys, but the one I like to use is the pivot chord. The G9 flat 5 allows me to move to C minor, since G is the 5 of C, and it doesn't feel jarring in context because the G dominant chord was also used earlier in the F sharp minor section. The chord tones, along with the first 4 notes of the vibraphone melody here, are all part of the same whole tone scale. The whole tone scale is often used as a transitional element, and since there are only 2 unique whole tone scales, many keys belong to the same scale, so using this makes pivoting between those keys easier. The next chord in this section is the same, except a B is added and the A is lowered to an A flat. This is done for 2 reasons. The A flat is diatonic in C harmonic minor, and also it strongly wants to resolve down to a G. Using this chord leads the listener to understand that there is a key change. Even though the G7 flat 9 flat 5 doesn't resolve directly to C minor 9 in the beat, these 2 middle chords are enough to facilitate a key change. There are other excerpts that involve the same things that I've already discussed, so there's no need to analyze these much further. Let me close out by clarifying some key concepts. The dominant 7 sharp 9 sharp 5 chord is underutilized and effective in these beat battles. This chord works well when it functions as a 5 chord preceding a minor 1 chord. There was a lot of music theory in this video. To me, music theory is a guide that explains why certain things sound bad. However, you should not be reluctant to break these rules to make something that sounds good. The last topic that I wanted to talk about was beat battle pacing. Specifically, if you're making a 1-minute beat, you should spend most of your time making the first 30 seconds sound good. This is because the average voter will not have time to listen to your entire beat. And more importantly, voters will not wait until the end of a beat to decide if they like it. Therefore, I would try to grab the voter's attention within the first few seconds, and I would avoid simply replaying the sample at the beginning of your beat. This can cause voters to lose interest, putting you at a disadvantage before your beat actually starts. Well, that's the entire breakdown. I'm currently a composer and sound designer working on the game Personalize, which is a PlayStation 2 style survival horror game which involves switching between first person and third person to solve puzzles and fight enemies. We're releasing a demo in a few months, so if you want updates on what we're doing, I've put a link in the description to our Twitter. So that's all for this video. Subscribe if you want, and thanks for watching.